At this point, we'll continue with the school building committee meeting. This meeting is being recorded. And because we have remote participation, all of our votes will be done by roll call.
And Mr. Chair, if I might interrupt, I'm happy to report that we do not have any, although it has been happening for several meetings, we do have all members present.
Okay.
Our votes do not tonight, under those circumstances, need to be roll call. The only person we should have joining us remotely is our project manager, Jenna Carlson.
Oh, okay.
And she will join momentarily, but we can certainly begin.
All right. I'd ask for a motion to approve the set of minutes from the October 23rd, 2023, and the November 1, 2023 meeting. Situate. Second. Second by Hanson. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by aye. Unanimous. Motion carried. Public comment. They all left. Something. Design option discussion to be continued by Jen Carlson.
And Mr. Chair, in Jen's place, I ask Carl to just jump in. This is the point where we'll hear some feedback on some of the design options that Carl can speak to, and then following that, we can continue to pick up the conversation from our last SBC meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, thanks, thank you. Yeah, Jen will be joining us at some point here. I don't know if she's online or if we're gonna try to get here in person too, but she did put together an update of the cost options, and I just wanted to share where we're at right now before we get into that. This was the matrix that we started with, and we actually expanded it a little bit by showing the 2 addition renovations they are, and what used to be 3 and new construction, and we just wanted to note that we do have one to consider, that 2.1. But last time you voted to eliminate that one, that option, those 2 options, and then that option too, 805. So technically, this is where we are right now, but this is kind of where we start the discussion tonight, I guess. And the point that Jen wanted to make, and I know this might be a little hard to read, hopefully you got a copy of it in advance too, but she summarized the project costs for the options in play, and then also took a stab at breaking it down by town to show the relative percentages of the district's share of each project cost. And the math involved in this is basically, as you know, you take the project cost, and then there's a whole big spreadsheet behind the scenes you don't see that calculates how much of that project cost is eligible for reimbursement by the state, because they have pretty strict rules about how much you can spend per square foot on construction, how much you can spend on the site work. You know, there are things that are categorically excluded, like legal fees or parties, like your groundbreaking, things that, you know, they don't count. And also in the building square footage, sometimes if you exceed their standards, they'll allow you to build that, but they won't reimburse for it if you exceed certain standards. So there's a full page of ineligible categories. Left Field has taken a stab at that, you know, a little proactively to calculate what they think that the district share will be after you apply then the reimbursement percentage. And then, as you know, that share of the total project cost is allocated to each of the communities based on their percentage of enrollment. And so that's how each of the towns, you know, share was enumerated there. And the point that she wanted to make too was, and I think it was in the email that she sent you, that when you look at the range, and this is from 805 up to 975, the range of cost, the order of magnitude of difference there is certainly, all of these are big projects. All of them were, you know, big requests of each of the towns, no doubt. But perhaps you see it the way she was saying that the difference in and of itself may not be the strongest reason to choose one option against the other. That the order of magnitude is such that maybe there are other factors to consider in determining how we might reduce the number of options from this point going forward. But cost, may be one. And so just to give you an order of magnitude of what each town's share would be, we wanted to share this slide with you. So does that make sense? People understand sort of where we're at then?
Just a quick question, with the addition of the town of Marshfield, do we know how that ultimately will potentially affect those numbers?
I think that was negotiated in advance, right?
Yeah, so yes and no. Yes, it's written down. No, not at this point. All of these shares, all of these percentage shares will drop as Marshfield's enrollment increases. So for the first 4 years that Marshfield, from starting with fiscal 26 through fiscal 29, Marshfield's enrollment will be factored in and there'll be an annual offset. So the adjustable rate mortgage, and then we convert to a fixed after they've completed 5 fiscal years. So, and the rationale behind it was that with that amount of time having passed, we would have engaged with the new community, recruited students, parents, families are aware, and that's a snapshot of what the enrollment is. So whatever their enrollment is at that point in time, let's say it's 11%. Each town's share for the rest of the bond, the rest of the term of the debt, would go down by a respective 11%. Marshfield would pay, we would lower the assessments, just like Jim does with non-resident tuition. It would pass through back to the communities. So Marshfield doesn't know exactly what their share will be of whatever we're going to build. And we don't know what our 8 towns discounts will be. But presuming that with each passing year, there would be more students, we'll have to watch that.
I have a question. Say school's all built and Pembroke wants to join us, or Hull wants to join us,
Yep.
Hingham wants to join us. How long are they in the school system before, or do they have to go buy it?
If any other community wanted to join us at any point in the future, that power rests with with the regional school committee, exactly as we did with Marshfield. We would speak to the regional planning committee from the town of interest. We would have our own regional planning committee be in conversation, and we would bring a proposed regional agreement amendment to this school committee, where it would say, these are the terms and conditions. So Marshfield's terms and conditions were what I just described to Keith's question, as well as they paid a share of our stabilization fund. So Marshfield is contributing a little, close to $350,000 because we calculated an approximate estimate of what a future population might be. And we said, we as a district have saved, Jim mentioned it earlier, we saved a bag of money to not have to go back to our towns for an assessment spike for feasibility. It will save a lot of questions about whose money is being used to lower everyone's costs if you contribute a share. So it was a 2-pronged approach: contribute to the piggy bank and pay as you go on your enrollment until we reach a fixed point. I would argue that I think that's, while it leaves a little bit of mystery in terms of not knowing what the exact numbers will be, it does allow people to not have to have winners and losers. It does allow to not have to pick a fixed number. Now you could, Dan, you could absolutely say to the next town, we're going to pick a fixed number. It's going to be this number, and we'll let you phase it in. It's entirely within the control of the school committee. And so just to finish it up, if we have a tentative agreement with the interested town and we put it in writing and we run it up DESI legal, they say, yep, it looks good, you're not violating any laws, then the school committee approves it, and then it goes on a future town meeting warrant, perhaps in the spring or perhaps in the fall. And part of the terms and conditions could be, when does the new community join? It's entirely possible that, we know that with Marshall, it took a little over a year. So it would be, so let's just say hypothetically, if we were to vote a new building in early 25, it is entirely possible that we could have, with a little bit of legwork done in late 24, we could possibly have something in front of our towns in the spring of 25. At the spring town meetings, for something that would go into effect in the summer of 26. That's probably the most aggressive. Who, what are the terms? Obviously, that remains to be seen, but there is a process. And the good news is, we've had our regional agreement looked at. I can't imagine a ton has changed at the state level with laws and whatnot. So I don't think it would be an overwhelming process. But at the end of the day, the decision to admit would have to be factored in, and would be controlled by the school committee. And some of the factors that would be included, I think, would be, what are we building for? And when would we want that new relationship to start? We could start a new relationship with the new town prior to 2028, 29. Bringing in a 10th community while we're still a 670 student school would have an impact on everyone's current allotment of seats. So, and not knowing whether our voters will support a future project, that might influence people. So I would say for now, there's nothing right on the front burner, but there is a path forward if people are interested.
And out of district students not contribute to the building project. They're set by the state, what they have to pay.
So there's a couple of answers for that. Generally, the answer is no, right? And we are not allowed to accept non-resident students in grade 9 unless we no longer had any in-district interest. There is something in the chapter 74 regs that does allow the commissioner, if a district requested, that we could add what's called a capital increment. So if we did have non-resident students in grades 10, 11, or 12, my guess is it would have to be a unicorn situation of an older kid from a town outside of our 9 who wanted the 1 or 2 programs where there might be an extra seat. So I think that's going to become increasingly rare, but there is something in the regulation. So you could have a school that has a lot of non-resident kids and they need to take on a big capital project. And so the cost of the tuition is the cost to educate the kid. You know, if you're educating the kid and you're building a roof over the kid's head, the state says you can petition to say, here's the tuition and we can add on a little extra.
Right, because they're benefiting.
My gut would say we would not be in a position to, substantially benefit from that, but it is in writing somewhere.
Okay, anything else on the cost? I'm sure in coming days, weeks, months, we'll be talking about this again.
I think, Carl, if I may, Mr. Chair, just one more comment. As you've pointed out, these numbers are for comparison purposes only, for order of magnitude.
Right.
Doing the math, these numbers are very high, and I must say at the Marshfield Forum, I appreciated the Marshfield Assistant Superintendent, Tom Miller, who attended the forum, and when it was an opportunity where he could speak, he said, I remember words to the effect of, I remember when Marshfield went through its process, and I can remember being at this stage where the first $ numbers came out, and they did eventually come in this direction. Where we will be in 8 weeks, in January, is we will be looking at something that has gone from, what are we gonna narrow down tonight? It goes to you, it goes to the estimators, and these numbers will be refined before we pick a final enrollment and design.
Exactly.
So that's how the next 2 months will work.
We've lumped together all the new construction options here as one. In January, there may well be separation because one design may be slightly different than another in terms of, construction costs.
And so the designs that the committee has seen, the bird's eye view conceptual drawings, that you're handing your estimators something in greater detail, which is why we need to make some decisions to let you then do that homework and get it to them.
We'll share with you tonight some updated drawings already, so you can see the progress of how they get refined. But they'll go from, these hand sketches virtually to computer generated, floor plans and site plans that estimators can measure and quantify and so forth. And our engineers and consultants will be writing narratives for the system descriptions and so forth, so that again, the estimators can understand the quality level, quantities, roughly in comparison to other projects they've done. Because these are estimators that are in the business, they've done other schools, they're doing school estimating right now and other projects that are much further along, so they have a good, feel for the pulse of the construction community. Okay. what I wanted to talk about tonight too is we'll share with you some updated plans, and particularly showing some site constraints. And looking at the largest footprint, the 975, because I think there's some more information that may help guide us somewhat there. So we've been looking at this site plan before with Webster Street at the bottom of the page, and you can see all the green area, that's wetlands. Those are certainly site constraints. I wanted to share with you one other way. I flipped it around here because that's the way we've been looking at north is more to the top of the page now. That's the way most architects and engineers draw with more about. We're used to that in this hemisphere, looking at maps and globes that way. But one of the things to notice, see those orange, just for your reference point, that's sort of the limit of the active zone of the current school. That's the greenhouse and the horticulture building and the maintenance building and the concession stand. And the lighter orange is kind of the embankment next to the parking lot. And that sort of creates this line of what will be to the south of that, the construction zone. And to the north of that is the occupied school for the new construction option here. And so keep that in mind because that's another constraint in a way, in addition to the wetlands. And remember with the wetlands, pretty much the area that's cleared today, the area where the grass is mowed today is pretty much, we haven't talked to the Conservation Commission yet, but we're pretty certain that's as far as we could go. We can't cut down any more trees or mow any more grass in that direction. The neighbors on Dillingham will be pleased to hear that because we can't go any closer to that property line. So that's certainly the constraint on sort of three sides of the buildable area, and that horizontal line, and it's roughly pretty horizontal, is kind of the limit of the zone that in one way would be the optimum for the school's purpose to stay in operation, obviously without athletic field, but otherwise the school could operate with no loss. The buses could circulate, cars would still have the same amount of parking, if we could limit the construction zone to that area there. So as we look at some refined site plans, we'll superimpose that line so you can see what it means. The other thing we did, we added to this parking chart the number of buses, because in our parking calculations, we hadn't really allowed for storing those buses on site. And you don't have to, but that's the way you do it today here. And if you wanted to continue that way, we really would have to subtract, from the parking that we're showing on our site plans now. In the order of magnitude, these are buses down there, 12 buses, 14. And a bus parking, as you might imagine, takes up about the equivalent of 4 car parking spaces. So you could, add to the required parking, another 50 cars or so in each of these models to really accommodate the optimal sort of site development requirements there. So that's another point to keep in mind here as we look at the option. So again, we just added the 2.1 because I think we want to consider that too. Oops, I don't know why that 5 square is there. Sorry about that. But this is the courtyard option. Hopefully that doesn't show up, but here's the site plan for it at 805 student enrollment as to how it fits on the site. This is a fairly loose fit, we might say, at 805. In other words, if you look at the amount of parking in front of the building, there's still, a fair amount of green area there. The distance from the drop off to the building is that's probably 75 to 100 feet there away. There's sort of generous breathing room around the building. There's area behind the building for some parking and for some storage. There's a double bay of parking on one end. When we go to and there's that line as to where it is. One thing to keep in mind too, this may not be a major criteria for differentiating these options, but something to think about. We've experienced this on other projects like this, where we're building on one part of the site and the current school exists on another part of the site. there's that first year of occupancy when you're transitioning into the new school. You can't tear down the existing school fast enough to build the rest of the site plan, the parking, the athletic field. So that first academic year, when you're in the new school, you won't have all that parking at your disposal there. And so we have to think about that, you know, where are teachers gonna park, where are students gonna park, how are buses gonna circulate, and so forth. I think in this case, we haven't done the logistics plans, but we will. That's part of thinking about these. I think we could get in the, you know, the drop-off loop, that could be built. Let's say the ideal construction timeframe is that the new school comes online at the beginning of the school year. So you have that summer beforehand to like move in furniture and equip and get all the bugs, you know, worked out and so forth. And you could start on the demolition, the abatement and demolition of this building. You could also start on, you know, building the new roads, maybe even start earlier. So you could certainly, you know, make sure that you get buses in and cars in to the, you know, the new building site and be able to fence off the existing school safely so that the contractor who's doing the demolition, those activities are clearly separated. But even in this model, you wouldn't be able to build all this parking. Maybe some of it, we can, you know, and again, this is where, when it comes time, we're gonna talk about how to build this project, whether it's a general contractor or a construction manager. Those are the two different ways in Massachusetts you can proceed. Having a construction manager on board has the advantage of joining us on the design team while we're still designing. And we can talk about issues like this, and they can help with the logistics, the constructability and so forth, because it will be a challenge here. Because again, just, again, using this one as an example, but imagine if that were a fence, if that were the line, and we try and keep all the construction activity in this zone here, we couldn't go any further beyond where those green trees are. For those in the construction business understand, you need not only the space to build the building, you need the space to lay down materials, to move cranes around, to put trailers up, to park the number of workers. A project this size, when it gets going, it could have 150 workers at some point here. And you don't have to provide parking spaces for them. They can make their own arrangements, but one way or another, you know, it's going to be figured into the project costs and challenges. So you can see, you know, what the issues are there. In reality too, this line doesn't go straight across. It actually does, you might say, jog up here, and there is some more space over here that we might be able to utilize. We've just simplified it for this diagram. But anyways, that's when we talk about site constraint, that's the reality of site constraints here. So I think there's a question there.
Yes. Chairman, go ahead. We're shoehorning in the entire project into one space. Is there a possibility, instead of doing a football field and a softball and a baseball field, to do one field that would cover all three sports? To limit the need, you know, instead of having a football field on that side, is there space in the front that you could do a because the football field's used in the fall and the other stuff's used in the spring, so it's graduation, but is there a way, have you seen in the past where there's just one field that can adjust to softball, baseball, and football?
In the other site option, let me go to the next one. And so in this site option, there's still, whoops, we got to admit Jen, I'm sorry, she's been there a while. There she is. Hello, Jen, sorry, I didn't see you.
She just popped up.
Oh, did it? Okay. So here's, in essence, if you plant grass in the entire front yard, this is what you end up with, is about that much space, which is the size of a football field and baseball field. If you wanted an entire grass plain there, you could eliminate the track. It would give you some flexibility, but you don't gain all that much. You can still see the size of the football field is roughly, a soccer field is a little bit bigger than a football field, but and a baseball field there. So that's how much real estate, you know, we have to work with there. there are some ways of overlapping some fields, but I'm sure that during off seasons, you probably still use the football field for practice, for spring sports, and lacrosse plays there, and so forth. So I think you'd still make use of all of the green areas, on there, in that regard. So this is the other alternative site layout, but it still has that line on it. And this is now showing 975 students. And one thing to notice is how close the building is getting to that line right there. And there's, you know, less space kind of around the back of the building as the footprint gets a little bit bigger. Fortunately, you know, on this week, we were still able to get some parking in here, which is good because again, that first year, that parking could be built. So there would be those parking spaces, you know, and I would imagine, you know, in a pinch, that first year, you're gonna park vehicles all around the building on the backside, probably parallel parking wherever there's pavement, and so forth. But you can see kind of the constraints that happen as the student enrollment goes up there. And this is, you know, a fairly efficient layout of parking in the front yard here. And even with this, we probably will run into some issues with the Hanover planning board with site plan review. They'll say, oh, we'd like more trees and more grass in the parking area. We don't like these big shopping areas that pave everything. Generally, we can get away with 2 rows of parking with no grass. Here you can see a planting strip between that one and the 3rd row. That's generally what we found with planning boards. They'll accept that, and we still have to put some trees in there. You can see there's some islands. The snowplow guy doesn't like that. He wants to be able to clear the whole thing, I know, but we have to have some islands too, probably with trees. So it's a pretty efficient layout, kind of maxing out. And even with that, you can see for the 975, this plan here only gets to 411 parking spaces. And that's again, without counting buses, not allowing for any buses. They're assuming they're off-site if we're using all 411 for cars. It does not include some parking spaces that are up here by the district office. In the back, there's about 20, I think, spaces there. So those could be in play too, obviously.
I have a
So,
question.
yes,
When it pertains to ball fields,
yeah.
has there been any of the previous buildings that you've been associated with, has anybody ever tried using some of the wetlands? Because you're not building, it's not a build area, you're not building, you're just using.
You can get up to the buffer area, and we're doing that with the
Can you get a
sub.
waiver, can you get a waiver, have you ever applied for a waiver from conservation? It's not a real dense populated that area
Yeah,
to do that, because
in some of these, see even the softball field, see that little bit right there? We are pushing it. That's cutting off, that's filling some of the wetland.
Yeah.
To get that field in there. So we would expect the state does allow, you can fill up to 5,000 square feet as long as you replicate somewhere else to make up for it. But whether it's building or field, if you're disturbing, you know, filling or impacting a wetland, they look at it kind of the same way.
Another question. To go along with Jim's idea. What about just softball? How much we can gain in parking? Well, if we could put the softball field in the same place as the football. I mean, this sounds silly, but that's been done on a professional basis. When the Patriots played at Fenway Park. Sounds crazy, but
Your current softball field overlaps
Yeah.
with your track and football field now.
Yeah.
Yes, you could do that. Yeah. That would be a trade-off. That would be a trade-off, and we could, you know, show that it's not inherent in any one of these designs. The fields and the site work is kind of interchangeable in terms of making a decision. One of the issues, though, we might run into is, earlier, like 3, 4 years, 5 years ago, when some work was requested of, you know, trying to expand into certain areas, including right out here, I think, right? This area of the site was identified, yes, it's upland, and then there's still respecting the 35-foot buffer from their wetland. But I believe when the plan was put in front of the Conservation Commission, they identified it as as to be used by the horticulture program and kind of an agricultural use, meaning grass being planted there for a field is probably okay. If we tried to pave it and make it parking lot, we might get some pushback. But, I'm not sure what the trade-off was, what you got elsewhere, but maybe it was the bus parking, or trying to pave a few more spaces out here.
They were two separate asks. What we did out back here was to clear some space for the growth and development of the horticulture program, so
Yeah.
we weren't gonna put any structures on it. This space here was just a separate request for additional parking for the restaurant and
Right.
for events.
Yeah.
I had a question about, the buses circulate in a clockwise direction going behind the building.
Yeah.
And when they have gathered their students at the end of the day, they're going to go on to the drop-off loop that's at the front of the building. And they're gonna turn right, because that's the direction of the flow.
Most
correct?
likely, that would be one-way road, yeah.
Is the road wider where you've got cars that are
Yes.
parked at the curb? So that a bus can get on the other side of it?
It would be.
Okay,
Typically, we would design all the roads, even if you intend them to be one-way, we would design them to be wide enough to be two-way.
Yeah.
Because we've been in this business long enough we've seen things change.
Yeah.
Over time, and you want to be able to accommodate both, but you also get the advantage of, for special events, you can parallel park. And
Yeah.
still have through traffic on a 25-foot wide street.
if a school bus wanted to go, is it Main Street, the other exit?
Yes,
Are they gonna turn left going against the flow of traffic to get, like a school bus would have to turn
no,
left?
everyone would still exit, the right-hand exit point on the plan. And you turn left on Webster Street like they do now.
Actually, Carl, I think George is talking about in the upper left corner, the potential of going over those wetlands for.
Oh, I'm sorry,
egress to Main
where that
Street.
arrow is,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a pretty extensive wetland crossing to get there. I think it's about 80 or 90 feet wide. A bridge would be needed across those wetlands.
Yeah.
Again, we could consider asking for something there, this talks about the potential of additional parking, or maybe it's an additional, playing field. Because it is a rectangular, piece of land that's available there. It's not quite wide enough for a legitimate field, a soccer field. But it could work for practice if it was grass. But to get a bus to go there, it would be nice, I guess, to separate the traffic. But it has other issues of impacting the butters and neighbors and so forth, but it may be worth pursuing almost independently of the building project, because if you could live without it, you might be able to say, we'd like to get, the school project approved, and then we'll work on getting something beyond that approved, maybe.
would it be narrower than, because it looks like the road is narrower than the drop-off loop?
Yeah, we're just showing a pedestrian path
I see.
in this sketch.
Got it. Okay,
Because if it were a playfield, still need to be able to get students to walk there.
Yeah.
And there would be a much narrower boardwalk across the wetlands.
Got it.
So that too requires permission. None of this is, as of right,
Got it.
even to get pedestrians across.
Thank
Yeah.
George's fire apparatus too, have a radius fire apparatus,
Yes.
that's why it has to be the moving road.
got it.
So this again to show when the footprint gets bigger for 975 students, particularly in the courtyard, because the courtyard plan, remember, it includes, oops, did I have the plan back there? Sorry. We had that black spot, is it still there? It's still there, sorry. The plan, you can see some blue spaces there. The plan for the courtyard project. Sorry, I don't know what's happening there. It's one of those gremlins. There are some academic spaces on the ground floor of this building. So this plan, when we start thinking about what's different between NC1, NC2, and NC3, what's different about NC1 is that there are some academic spaces on the ground floor. So it's a bigger first floor than the others. So it takes up a little bit more of the site. The other thing to notice in this arrangement here, that the commons area there, you can see that large area right there, that's the open sort of cafeteria area. It gets natural light from the courtyard. So when you come in, straight ahead would be, we suggest maybe some student services, close to where the students are, but not immediately at the front door, but close. And the natural light is, into the courtyard, there. So that, to compare that to the next one, which is the linear version, here we are. So here's a somewhat more refined plan, but when you come in the front door here, you look straight through the building. There's glass straight ahead, and that's where the natural light gets into the common. That's kind of an inherent difference in this plan versus the other plan. From an architect's point of view, as to, what are the outlooks? We think about, when you're in the building and you're in a space like a cafeteria or common, what are the views from it? How does it get natural light and so forth? Now, again, this is the layout you've seen before. One of the issues here, this shows, the main entrance for school visitors, right by administration. There's some other, potentially district administration right here on the ground floor, right by the entrance. The assembly spaces are at one end of the building. The academic spaces are at the other end. At this point here is what we might call a customer entrance. We did locate like some admin space right here. The vocational coordinator might be there, might be some other offices. So with some oversight of that second entrance. And that allows, we'd still suggest, that you come in here into that vestibule and the inner door would be locked. So the public couldn't go any further into the building at that point. You could only turn right or left, go to the salon or go to the restaurant. And again, even that could be coordinated where the outside door is locked and only people, in that end of the building, either in the restaurant or the salon, cosmetology, buzz you in. If it's the hours when the restaurant's open and so forth. But in any event, there's sort of a node here to break up each of these, just to give you scale, that's about 200 feet. So there's 200 feet, you come to a node where there'd be an open stair to connect to the floors above, and then another 200 feet there for each of, 4 shops here, 4 shops there on the ground floor.
I have another question. Are these shop locations cast in stone? Could you put veterinarian on the other side of metal fab so that it's near horticulture? I'm just thinking of noise and exhaust fumes and stuff like that. Maybe you wouldn't want to put the veterinary program next to the auto shop.
Yeah, there's a to answer your question, first of all, no, we could change some of these titles. There is some logic to them. These are all construction shops here in this block. They sort of go together. And sometimes we've done some schools where literally the construction shops have doors between shops, interior doors from one shop to the next. Metal fab and advanced manufacturing and FAT, for instance, they sometimes share equipment or share supplies. They might want to have a door connecting them. So there's some adjacencies that do make sense. Others, could be flipped and so forth. Also, depending on the size that they end up with, it matters sometimes. Just from a structural point of view, we like to avoid having columns in the shop if you can, having it be wide open, and so have the demising walls, as they're called, dividing shop from shop, be on a structure line.
You'll have to excuse me because my eyes have failed me, and what was MET I thought was VET.
Oh.
Okay, so I apologize.
That's what do we call it? Manufacturing
Yes,
and engineering technology. The veterinary science is up here, so it is separated from auto
It sure is.
and up here. And also,
Disregard last transmission.
okay. But that's another challenge though with these plans that people should, keep in mind. Veterinary science may be another one of those programs that does need some frontage to allow people to bring their pet in.
Yeah.
And be on the outside wall as opposed to way around back or something. We don't know, but
That's how they did it up at Essex Aggie.
yeah.
Good question. This just gets back to the athletic fields over to the left-hand side, so to speak. How about we need for the design to switch to where the gym area is over on the right?
Yeah.
To put the gym on the left and everything over there, because now everything is closer to there. You don't have students walking
Yeah,
all the way across and around the school to get to.
that, we did think about that, and there is certainly logic to that, kids going from the locker room to the athletic fields. If you were to mirror image this plan, the one difference is, if you think about driving up to the front door, for the arrival time, if this is cars in front, and so these are parents dropping off kids, people tend to stop at the front door, even if you had a long that went way past it. And so if it were a mirror image, and the main entrance were on what would be the right-hand end of the building as you approach it, people would stop there, and you'd sort of lose the whole drop-off lane. We're here, we tend to, when we have a choice, when it's not really super important one way or the other, we would tend to put the entrance at the far end of a drop-off loop, so that cars could stack up and still be in front of the building and close, as opposed to.
No, I'm just saying, if you flip it,
Human
there'd be
nature.
more parking over for the athletic fields in advance. And there's leaving room over there.
Well, I think one positive thing about this plan in general, some people don't like so much parking in the front yard. At least the parking is close to both the building and the athletic fields. So you don't have to have a separate parking lot for like
That's if
football
the
games.
fields are out front, which, yeah, I don't think a lot of us are big, I don't know, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm a big fan of that, you know, fence close to the street like that. I like to go on the side. Better,
But yeah,
That's just
even
my
if it were on
opinion.
the side, like that other one, you know, you'd still be well served by a good amount of parking that would be in close proximity.
but you'd also have it at the gym as well, they get limited now for the spaces for the gym.
Yeah, I mean, we have, you know, a parking lot here, it varies at different options as to how large it is. But, you know, and parking, there's visitor parking right off the loop here, and all of these options too. So that, you know, could serve for handicap parking, obviously, which needs to be close to the front door. But that's why we made the decision to put those assembly spaces on the right-hand end of this plan as opposed to mirror imaging it.
Carl, when in the process does your, is it Larson, Werner Larson? Werner Larson. What is their, and they're the landscape architects that are working with PRA.
Yeah.
When do they start getting a little more involved?
They're working on these right now,
Okay,
taking, you know, and we've sort of collaborated a little bit to date on it, but they'll take it to the next level when we give it to the estimators. They'll refine this, they'll look at some of these issues about drop off,
so you can bring back some of the feedback, some of the configurations for fields.
we will.
I know personally, I had mentioned something similar to what Tom had said about, it's a series of trade-offs,
Yeah,
as you pointed out. And with baseball and softball had a common outfield where
Yeah.
you had opposing infields, you just couldn't, you have to choose who's gonna play in practice. Again, it's a series of trade-offs, and we have to lean on some off-campus fields, but
Yeah.
obviously, this is all trying to prioritize keeping all of our stuff right here at 476 Webster. So
Right,
I understand that. But you have a consultant that could take some of these thoughts and come back at a future meeting and say
And show some. options.
feasible, not feasible, something in between.
Yeah, okay. So that's the original option 2, and just to show you the different sizes of it when it's in each. And here, now we get up to 975 students. Again, look how close the building is to that line. Now, so that would probably require taking those parking spaces that are next to the greenhouse offline in order to give the contractor enough room to build the building and get around it, you know, and so forth. To do foundations and digging and move a crane around the site, things like that. So this starts to show how the larger footprint is constrained on the site. And then we did want to share with you the option 2.1, where it's basically the same blocks of shops, but they're pulled apart and the core spaces are put in the middle. So it's still a linear arrangement of the main corridor, you know, from one end to the other. But now you enter a little bit more in the center of the building, you might say, still adjacent to administration. And the commons is now on the front of the building. And it would have a lot of light from that side, a window and maybe some outdoor space, on the front side of the building. And then the auditorium and gym are on the back side of the building, still in the center. And there's still, service areas coming in the back, and the kitchen is here, servery is serving, to the commons, dining room. And basically, the shop blocks are very similar to, NC2. So there's still an entrance over here, between culinary and cosmetology. There's still, the suggestion that there could be some administrative presence there to sort of, supervise that entrance, which would operate in the same way, of not allowing public any further into the building beyond there. And otherwise, the adjacencies are similar, and we just cleaned up the second floor plan to show you, if we wanted to try to keep this as a two-story building, one way to do it is to have these classroom pods, where you can see we're building, in these plans, almost entirely over the shops below. There's, a much shallower, amount of roof showing here. But all the classrooms still get natural light. They still all get windows. Some people look at these corner ones and say, I know those triangle ones, they look smaller, but they are the same square footage. It would definitely be something that your teachers would want to try out and feel, comfortable in. Not all the classrooms are triangular. Obviously, there's still some rectangular ones. Sometimes that's one way to handle it. But teachers that like teaching in that shape, can be assigned there. The ones that want to be in traditional rectangles can be assigned there. There's a variety. But again, the commons is a double height space in the center of the building there. There's a cursor. The gym and auditorium are still served, by sort of a common lobby. And the library is located here in the middle of the building. Again, a nice central location over the main entrance. And a little more central to where the classrooms are, you might say. And the balance of the shops are up here as well. So it's possible to arrange the program in a two-story way, here. And then just to take it to the next step of putting it on the site. It's very similar to the other, a little more compact, and because of the way it's kind of configured, and we sort of pushed it on the parking here to maximize it, to bring this road as close as conceivable to the building. I think we have about 15 feet of grass and a 10-foot sidewalk, so it's about 25 feet to the road there, which is about as close as you'd want to come. And we can get, in this plan, 500 parking spaces. So it is possible, but again, it's very tight. And when we put on that line again, you can see, again, that corner of the building is very close to that line. We do get a little bit more parking, both behind the building, around the building, and maybe in front that could be constructed for that first year of occupancy with this, just thinking about that. But we wanted to share that with you too, if that helps to see the difference between NC2 and NC 2.1. Again, the site plan itself can be flipped or played with in a variety of ways for any of these options. It does not really affect the layout of the building.
Carl, if you go back 2 slides. So the reason why this footprint is getting wider and wider, obviously with the student population, what's dictating that? Is that the specific shops that are identified on that bottom floor?
Yeah.
So if one of those shops were identified as a shop that could go on the second floor,
Yes,
the building could stay narrower and you just build higher?
right.
What's more cost effective?
Well, if push came to shove and we had to get, all this program there and we were running into these kind of constraints, we would find a way to put one of these or maybe more shops on the second floor. And you'd have to have a little bit less than ideal, day-to-day functional operation. We have suggested something like electrical, maybe, could go on an upper floor in an earlier version. It gets deliveries, let's say, at the beginning of each semester, or maybe a couple times of supplies. Sure. But once they're sort of staffed They don't need that overhead door every day. You do need the ceiling height still. And you do need a large enough elevator to get materials up there. So that's what we've done in a couple other, we did a urban vocational school in Springfield that had a very tight site. And I think we put HVAC, electrical, and there was a third typical high bay shop. We put them on the second floor with a freight elevator to get materials up and down on a regular basis. So there's some premium for that, but it's not so much the cost premium, it's more, can you live with it day to day? Does it make sense? We do have to beef up the structure a bit, for the floor of those shops, if there's heavy equipment on them. But you're right, that's what's dictating the size of the footprint is the enrollment, in each shop. It causes each shop to get larger and the building to get generally deeper. Any other questions on 2.1? Okay, move on. And then just to, you remember the wings, so-called, the one that's a little bit more like your current one. We looked at it, originally at a smaller enrollment, and then we looked at it, and even at the smaller enrollment, you can see how close it is to that line. And at the larger enrollment, it's actually encroaching on that line. To get those wings in at the size and to still have, you can see how tight, even the outdoor service area has gotten now here. So it causes the wings to get longer. Because again, we can't encroach, on the trees back here. So now we basically just have a driveway behind the building. Any truck, unloading is gonna happen on the sides, or this is the auto shop at that end. You can turn and drive into it and out of it. That's one reason it's on the corner. But like these shops here, they would all sort of load on the, the service court side of it. And the end would be, it could have windows, but wouldn't really be a loading zone. So you can still get buses around here now. You could still, have a drop off back there. This is one, by the way, this shows the greenhouse and horticulture right next to each other there, which is a nice arrangement. But in other options, in the previous options, we put the greenhouse up here where there's some space in the site plan. And those students would have to, go slightly outdoors, but it's near an entrance. It's relatively convenient there. But that's the impact on this option. Again, it really is constrained by the limits of the site, the NC3. So just to share that with you, and again, just to remind you, the view from the road, that hasn't changed. And we didn't really update the addition renovation one. You're all familiar with that, just we kept it in the deck here, but wanted to mention this matrix. And again, maybe with some of the things we've talked about tonight, or some of the things that you've asked questions about, you now realize maybe there are some other criteria that would help distinguish, which of these options rise to the top, or which have more, let's call them advantages than disadvantages. That's one way to think about it. None of them are perfect, maybe, but if you start thinking about what are the advantages of each option, what are the disadvantages of them, and just see kind of the scales of justice, whatever, which would help us when it comes time to make a final selection, but may help us tonight to help eliminate an option or two. But maybe you want to start with enrollments too. I don't know, in terms of thinking about that chart and the number of options.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we reconsider enrollment 805 back into the bold, eliminating it as we did last meeting.
I would like to second that. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on 805?
I think it makes sense to have it back on the table, studying a lower enrollment.
Okay, anything else?
And cost and size.
For the motion and a second, all the discussion, all those in favor of putting 805 back on the table? It is unanimous. We'll be cutting tonight on anything, but that's all.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, sir.
I will try to balance the scales of justice and, from what Carl presented tonight, given that equator that he drew in the middle of a lot of those pictures at 975. I think it would be appropriate for us to eliminate 975 as an enrollment consideration. So I would make a motion to that effect.
Motion to eliminate 975, second by Hanson. Any discussion on that?
I mean, complete, I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Completely.
We have one main group, seven.
Unless, I mean, that's. We could pick some designs, to that, that we would want to study at it, but,
Yeah.
all of the new designs are running into the same, roughly the same limitations. 2.1 looked a little bit better, looked a little more condensed. But I think the cost, even though all the cost numbers will come down, the cost, the site limitations, and the potential for us to actually enroll more students than what we actually build for. Would be, that's what's influencing me.
Go ahead, George.
I think also it'll be an easier pill to swallow for all of the towns that are gonna consider the cost of the 975 compared to any of the other options that are still on the table. We look fiscally responsible.
Yes.
I like the term bill to swallow.
Yeah. That's our medical, we eliminated the thing, yeah. Okay, we have a motion to eliminate 975. Now that we'll put 805 back on. Any further discussion on that matter?
Yeah, so we're gonna be looking at two options, 805 and 900. That's what we're looking at.
If 975
Right,
is
it's off the
eliminated.
table. How much of a difference would it be to investigate with the prices for the 907? I know my biggest issue is the fact that for 900, the school is bigger and there's less, we don't have enough land to be able to maybe handle that. Or we're gonna eliminate a lot of parking and issues like that. I can understand that. But does it make that much of a increase in if we just look at it? You know,
Yeah, I think, well, others can chime in, but I think part of the takeaway is, if we have too many designs left on the table tonight,
yeah,
if we study 3 enrollments, plus at least perhaps 3 enrollments of the ad reno, we're getting into a number of designs that when we have to make that final decision in January,
Yeah.
the feedback from the project team is, if we can narrow it down, if there's not consensus, the team will come back. Carl and I have talked about this. The team will bring back the best information they can through their estimators. So if we don't have an appetite to narrow it down to 6 or, just like 2 enrollments and 2 designs, then that's what this committee decides. The question will be when we get to January, if the level of detail on the designs isn't what it could be, that less detail means greater variance of cost numbers when the estimators come back. And Carl, you can speak to that a little bit better than I can perhaps, but I think that's the sense I got from.
Yes, yeah.
because I was looking at the design, and I'm not in favor of 975, I think it's too big, but there may be some advantages in the way the classrooms are situated. Is there any way of possibly looking at that and incorporating it into either the 805 or the 900?
There certainly is. That's exactly the kind of feedback we'd love to hear, Dan. Because there are some, the plans we showed tonight, we were just pushing and to show the constraints for 975. Doesn't mean that those layout, the positives of that plan certainly can be applied to the 805 or 900 enrollments.
Right, I just don't think we have enough land.
No,
Right.
there is the potential, for us.
Third floor?
Well, yeah, for most of these designs, Dan, there will be a 3rd floor, with the exception of 2.1 at a certain enrollment level, like you showed.
Right.
But I think that the other thing we know is that if we build for 805, we know that we could, in the future, we're talking 6 years to build it, 4 more years to fill it. we can see what the reality is, and you can put more than 805 students in there. It is short-sighted, however, for us to go from an overstuffed school at 670 to then go to an overstuffed school. So we don't want to we don't want to over rely on that flex factor.
Right.
But I think if you build for 975 could definitely be over 1,000, in terms of a larger, a super district. But again, that's why if the numbers are in the middle, you still have a little bit of flex.
At that price, we'd have, if we fill that school, we'd have to have parking off campus and shuttles.
We're talking decks. Question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was curious if we were trying to figure this out. Is it possible to have a building that's 2 stories high, and then in 15 years, we realize we really need a 3rd story? So is it possible that the 2-story building could accommodate a 3rd story? Would it be engineered to,
It is possible, but not very practical. We would show, propose other ways of expanding the building than vertically.
Okay.
Because expanding vertically is very difficult from a constructability point of view.
Yeah.
In an occupied school,
elevators, et cetera?
you'd end up vacating the 2 stories underneath it
Yeah,
into modulars, because you're not gonna get a contractor to work above occupied space safely. Yeah,
plus building codes change.
that too, and a lot of things weigh against it. So,
Go ahead, Jeff.
Carl, on the, first question regarding reimbursement. Sandy, Keith and I visited Minuteman last. When the design is done, does MSBA reimburse us for common areas or teacher prep rooms or anything like that?
yeah, there's in that spreadsheet that I talked about, the space summary sheet, there's a template, and it's pretty sophisticated, but we do work in other states compared to the way other states think about it. The MSBA is pretty good about listing, not just the educational spaces, but the required support spaces as well. And they have a good factor for what's called net to gross, the corridors, the stairs, the toilet rooms, elevators, mechanical spaces of an additional 50% space. So if you add up all your classrooms and all your educational spaces, you get 100,000, you can build a building of 150,000 square feet. For instance, to go
On our visit, they built the school for 650. I think 4 years ago, 2019. I think they've got 680, they've got 30 more kids than they actually built. And I know that they've turned 2 teacher prep rooms into classrooms. They've turned a common area into a classroom. And the common theme was, we don't have enough classrooms. Already, they've turned related classrooms into regular classrooms.
yeah.
So,
Had a enrollment a little bit less than ours with double the number of shop footprints. So there are 19 shops.
Yeah, they try to be all things to all people.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and finally, how, this is a puzzle with all the shops. How easy is it after visiting other schools? Is it to hey, we want our horticulture to be on the end because they're gonna have retail prices, as opposed to stuck in the middle? And you think of Tom and Cassie when they do their plant sales, they're now in the back of the building. They're gonna drag everything someplace in order.
Yeah,
to
we've
sell.
talked with them, we envision, if you can envision this sort of entrance here, let's say that there's a public entrance. And not only is there access to the public shops like cosmetology and culinary, but there's also a school store. And the school store is not literally part of the horticulture shop itself, but maybe it's across the hall from it or very close by. And hopefully close to the greenhouse too, if they're taking flowers. I don't know exactly. I think that flowers go from the greenhouse to the shop and then to the store. But the students can also, have display shelves, refrigerators, these kind of glass fronted, so you can keep flowers fresh. But also could be used when it's not flower sale time by the graphics people, graphics department, for their sales, or they print T-shirts or coffee mugs or whatever they're selling too at times. So it wouldn't be a big footprint, maybe as large as, 20 by 30 or something, but enough glass right at the public entrance. So all those people that come to the restaurant every week or salon have the opportunity to buy something from the school too. So yeah, we have thought about that, and think it doesn't require moving the whole horticulture shop to be, right up front too necessarily, but certainly close to that store.
Just a reminder, we do have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, and move the square.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's good. I just have one question. If we want to say eliminate 975, but bump up the 900 to say 925, to kind of meet somewhere in the middle there, is that worth exploring? Where we know 975 is really bursting at the seams, but maybe there's a little bit more wiggle room than the 900. Does it make sense to explore that option, or at this point are we beyond that?
My understanding is that it would require us to have to redo some previously submitted work. So if, for instance, if 925 is an enrollment sweet spot, building for 900 would allow for the ability to enroll 925.
Yeah, we think within these numbers, these are all what we call target enrollment numbers.
Yeah.
They're not capacity numbers, they're not the limit of what the school can have, and certainly they're, without even adding staff, depending on how you handle it, you could probably get an additional 10% of students in this building, in any of these buildings. So 800 could go to 880 or something.
Yeah, so these are all numbers you've all talked about before. If we have, all round numbers, we have 700 kids in the building right now. We have Marshfield coming on board that once they've been here for 4 years, that they'll maybe have another 100 kids in the building. That's 800. And then we have room capacity for another 100. That's 900 students within our district with with a wait list of about 100. That gets us to the 900. That's everybody in, all in, with still capacity for another 100, not identified here, but able to fill that, beyond capacity space like we're doing now. Gets us to 1,000 students in the building, opportunity for another district to come in, or opportunity for increased demand. I think 900 is a number that I personally feel comfortable with.
You can say the end of that.
So if we've got 700 kids in the building right now,
Yeah.
and we've got estimated 100 kids on the wait list, that gets us to 800. We've got Marshfield coming on board.
Yeah.
After 4 years of enrollment, they've got maybe 20 kids here. That's another 100. That gets us to the 900. We still have wiggle room over 900 of what, another 10%, another 100 kids for increased demand in the new building, or another district that Pembroke wants to come on board. We still have room for that within a 900 footprint school.
Yep.
You need a second on that motion?
No, we have a second. We're still in discussion on that.
And I would just, I'm sorry. So I think the operating costs are another consideration, the idea that we would need to, on an annual basis through the school committee and through the budget appropriations process, we need to find something that we can staff. So it'll be a series of years of rapid growth, but one cohort of kids at a time. So instead of bringing in 175 ninth graders, maybe we're bringing in 220. And with each passing year, as those kids go from their academic cycle to their shop cycle, there would be an increase in staff, and then a little plateau, and then an increase in staff. So whatever the numbers are, we're gonna make sure that we can present affordable budgets for that as well.
Right now, we're close to 670 right now, so almost.
Yep.
So that's 300, we're going to 975, that's 300 students. I agree with the future. But also, we can't bank on, we think Pembroke is gonna come in, we think Duxbury, and possibly, but again, those are just things. What are we gonna do then?
And in addition,
So that's why I think we just stick with what we have now, the 9, and worry about the future in the future.
and Mr. Chair, to former Mr. Chair from earlier this evening, it's also is a separate conversation about bringing in more communities. What capacity do we have, and what is the impact on each town's allotment of seats, which is a separate conversation to figure out when the time comes.
The fact that we only have enough land to build a certain size building, that's the main thing, is If we had land galore, then that would be a problem, but you can't build on what,
We're good. Okay. I'll end that. All those in favor of the motion on the floor to eliminate 975, please signify by raising your hand. It's unanimous. 975 is off the table.
so we're looking at 805 and 900.
900.
Mr. Chair, may I propose that we eliminate the NC wings for 805 and 900?
Second.
NC construction wings.
Wings, oh, okay. Do we have a second on that motion?
Okay.
What would that do to the building?
Second by Sandy.
So, Mr. Chair, at this point, Bob's motion is now we've finished the enrollment discussion presumably, and now we've got to see what we can come to consensus on in terms of the design. So the ad rent 01 at 805 and 900, that's a lock.
Yep.
MSBA is asking us we have to study an ad rent option.
Right.
So those two at the top in blue they will make it to the semifinals. And so the next step is to see what we can do with NC 1, 2, 2.1, and 3. So the next question is, which of these designs is the least desirable for this committee? And if there are, we could eliminate some tonight. That's what Bob was asking.
Bob is asking to eliminate NC3 wings, is that correct, Rob?
Yes, correct.
And do we have a second? Sandy, I'm sorry, you did that already. Oh, Sandy, I'm sorry.
What will that do with being able to fit the students?
It won't eliminate the enrollments at 805 and 900 are set.
Yeah.
We're just eliminating one of those designs for those enrollments. So design number, Kyle, can you find the slide for NC3 again? Okay, slide 21. Yeah. So Dan, that's the first floor of
So we're looking at eliminating where the column are at.
Eliminating from consideration.
So we can just instead of the biggest amount, we would be looking to have something that would be more linear, which would it would be more like this. And we'd be eliminating all this space here.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Just cross out the whole page.
Right back, there you
The
go.
whole page.
Well, I just wanted- I mean, when this, where it says service yard, what does that mean? What's a service yard? Grass?
It's like, no, it's paved, like what you have today, in between this new wing and the original building, that space outdoors,
And that's paved
it's paved.
and it could be used for parking.
No, you
Yeah,
use it
a little bit, but it's more for service to get in and out. It might have some storage boxes out there, it might have the sawdust collector.
I mean, as long as it doesn't interfere with the, running of the school.
But also that space, would that be used for automotive, having their cars, the cars they're working on, and the extra vehicles that they have that are out there now?
They could
Be in
park
that area
some
there.
vehicles there, yeah. You can't clog it up too much, because you gotta get trucks in and out of there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sandy.
I was originally a fan of this design, and I wondered if I was a fan of this design because it looks similar to the one that we have now, and it's where I'm comfortable, and I like the idea of seeing the kids in and out and crossing over and being a part of this community atmosphere. And while I didn't love a lot of things about the Minuteman facility, that space, what I did notice is that those spaces weren't necessary. They were not in use in that school with no negative impact to students. The courtyard space was not a necessary part of the automotive program. The courtyard space was not a necessary part of the horticulture program. They had the facilities they needed to do their work within the footprint of the school. This is what I observed in that space.
It's like a courtyard here, up there.
Yeah.
It seems to be just a storage, and we got a space, but still.
Well, for example, even electrical kids here go outside to read pipe. They go outside to read pipe because there isn't enough room for 25 of them to be reading pipe inside the shop.
Right.
In the shop space and not in our Minuteman, they could be inside the space doing the same exact work. It wasn't work required to be done outside, it just is because we're.
Yeah, right. It was good.
But then once they do all that work, when they bring it out to the school,
They're out there, there's
Say, we bring
capacity
it all in
outside.
with the- Yeah, you're talking about building elevators if they go up in the second floor and stuff like that, there, so you have to have a place for them to go into it.
Every shop in the other designs too, and in this one, every shop has access directly outdoors
Exterior
with an overhead, every
Overhead door,
heavy duty
garage door.
shop. With an overhead door.
Yeah, by eliminating those set spots, if it closes up the school, you have more space on the outside,
Yes,
so the parking.
yes.
Sir, I also. I was just gonna comment, I think from being a teacher, being in the shop footprints, having a shop, these are more kind of like, I would call them finger shops, right, a little bit narrower,
Yeah.
okay? We'd rather have the wider, more, square type of shops, it's more usable space.
That makes sense.
So that's another thing to consider.
From an architectural point of view too, those corridors that are running down each wing, they're necessarily gonna be narrower than, the Main Street kind of corridors, because they're longer. We can't devote excess space to corridors. So it becomes, in order to keep this, model the same square footage overall as the others, those corridors are necessarily a little narrower, than otherwise.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to eliminate the wing design NC3, I believe.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, could I just ask one other question? Carl, could you just clarify, outside, in the other designs where you're on your shops on the first floor, something like that.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at the bottom of that picture where the
Yeah.
solid line is, would say carpentry, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, how much space is available from the outside? Let's assume there are bays there.
Yeah.
How much space in feet from the road or whatever you're,
Typically, we try to get 50 feet there.
so there'd be
50 feet, so there'd be, the road going around at least 25 feet wide of pavement.
okay.
And then an additional 25 feet, between what's in front of the building or adjacent to the building or beyond, depending on the various options, as the building changed in width, that got tighter or looser, but, as a minimum, that's what we try to get.
25 feet from the edge of the building to the curb, and then 25 feet for the road that's in the back of.
Yeah, yeah. There wouldn't necessarily be a curb, it would all be paved,
Sure.
at 50 feet. Yes.
Okay.
Just looking at, listening to this, made me wonder, when the school buses drop students off in the morning,
Yeah,
in the front of the building, we were talking about an entrance for the public,
Yeah.
and then the other one for the, sort of the cafeteria area. So when the kids come in the morning and they have to get into school,
yeah.
how many entrances are there at the
That's-
back of the school?
That's what we're showing here, that, there would be entrances at these sort of wedge points between.
Yep,
Just for that purpose, so that students getting off buses could get in at multiple points. We would envision buses, a few would stop over here or in the afternoon when they all queue up.
Yeah.
A few would be on the right-hand side, a few would be back here. They sort of congregate around each entrance point. So if you're on bus 7, which door to go out
Yeah.
from the school. Or obviously, if you were in the shop at the end of the day, you just go directly out from the shop. And find the bus. So the plan does try to anticipate, in each of these options. That's what these corridors are, and the commons area, you can enter at either side of that too. So if buses were there, or in this option, there's several entrance points back here. And a very long drop off area for buses too. In this option, as well as on the ends of the building too, if there were 3 or 4 buses parked on this end and 3 or 4 on the other end. At the end of the day, and the balance of them around the back here, there are multiple ways to get into the building.
Anything else? Motion on the floor, could I see a show of hands? All those in favor of eliminating the wing design? Please raise your hand. It is unanimous. No, I thought, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't. Okay, Carried.
Carried.
Was it unanimous?
So used to having unanimous. Yeah. Eight, 3, 4, 6, 8.
Could I make a motion to eliminate the courtyard design for both the 805 and 900?
Second. What, design what? The courtyard design. Yeah, but how do you get light in there? In the classroom?
Well,
I'll second for the purposes of discussion.
Okay. Like no,
Oh, I'm sorry.
sorry.
I thought the courtyard was there for lighting. Not like that.
It isn't.
Well, it is, it's changed the time.
It is in that layout there for natural light, but it was also basically a response to what we heard in the visioning sessions from some of the participants who appreciated, somewhat from COVID times, being able to go outdoors, bring students outdoors in a sort of contained area for supervision. But in terms of the way it fits on the site, it's not ideal for the limited piece of property we have here. We did do it in order to respond to those folks that asked for it, but it is not the best, the optimal kind of shaping of a building on this limited parcel.
But if we did eliminate this, Carl, that doesn't mean that we're eliminating those classrooms, correct?
Oh, of course not. That's a requirement. All educational spaces, although technically, when we have a big shop, it'll have windows in it. If it has a related room, the related room may not directly have windows, but it's, in the shop that's kind of borrowing light. But all academic classrooms will have natural light, yes, in any design.
Go ahead, George.
The cafeteria area, which is that kind
Yeah.
of triangle shape, does that have a skylight in the ceiling? Is it 2 stories? It goes right to the roof?
It could have a big wall of glass,
It faces the school
that-
bus drop off end, right?
no, not in this one, not in this one. It faces the courtyard. The glass is on the
Oh, I
court.
see.
And it could be 2 stories high,
Yeah,
and it could even,
but if you got rid of the courtyard, could you have?
well, we're talking about the whole design,
That whole option.
that whole option. And so in the other linear options, the wall of glass is on the backside of the building. Okay, you could say it's facing the drop off, someone facing the woods. So in that sense, it's kind of a nice view.
So you wouldn't need
Trees.
you would need the skylights.
Right.
That would face south almost.
East.
Okay, where the court,
North is kind of diagonal in these plans.
go ahead, Tom. Where the courtyard is there a second floor above it
Yes, and a 3rd floor.
and a third?
On one side, there at least
Yeah.
there's a 3rd floor.
So, and you're saying the first floor, the second floor, I can see the second floor, they'll have windows.
Yes,
Our cafeteria right now would be looking out into a courtyard that isn't enclosed. And so the natural light for our cafeteria right now is obviously coming from the west facing windows, looking out into this open area here.
So,
So
right,
that same concept is where the light would come from.
so it would have, if the courtyard was missing and, closed up, and you close it up. The windows would be to the outside of the classroom, if you don't have classrooms, here's a here's the corridor, you have classroom on this side, you have classroom on that side. Right, and you're eliminating something, you may not have natural light, and I'm also thinking about safety issues as far as students getting out of that classroom.
There will be natural light and windows for all instructional spaces.
they're talking about eliminating that whole ODI option.
That's the nickname for the design, not just eliminating the courtyard.
Oh, you're not eliminating the courtyard.
New design number one.
Like the whole design,
yeah.
name, of course,
Yeah, so,
I'd have to see it, yeah.
so this design with that courtyard area, we want to eliminate this option. This design will eliminate this.
Mr. Chair? Just to continue where the motion is, If we eliminate, we've eliminated wings, which is a unique design. If we eliminate courtyard, and I'm not signaling my own opinion on this, we need to be sure that we want to have DRA go back and do a deep dive on what would be left, which would be 2 and 2.1,
Correct.
which is essentially, and I'm not saying it's bad, because if that's the consensus of the group, they'll take our marching orders and go. If we eliminate courtyard, I just want to make, I'm just making the comment that it would leave 2 new designs that have the same concept with, of course, one obvious distinction, and that is 2.1 puts the dining commons, thank you, Carl.
In the middle.
It puts it in the middle or it keeps it on the right. So I'm not suggesting that's bad, but if, I wouldn't want someone, because at this point, there isn't room for buyer's remorse after tonight, I guess. And if that's okay, I just want to, having looked at these designs and said, what's unique about them? If people like this center hallway, the concept, and maybe you heard something else tonight, and we just want vanilla and French vanilla, we just want 2 things that are close to one another, that is perfectly fine. But that's my thought.
I feel like pistachio is not Carl's favorite flavor, but I want pistachio too. So the courtyard is my sense is that it's not Carl's favorite design, but I really would like to have a different design so I can compare the strengths of both and see what design decisions can be brought from one platform to another. I want to practice with all 3 so that I can see what's available in all 3 and see what could translate from one to the other. In an end result.
I just wanted to add on why I said no courtyard, just so I get a little bit level of detail. I've seen several of the new buildings with courtyards, and I've yet personally to see one that was of instructional space used well. So I'm not saying it can't be used well, I'm not saying there's not good ideas out there. I just haven't personally seen one used well at this point. I think when it comes to snow removal, where are you moving the snow in that courtyard? You can't move it outside the courtyard, so it's gonna be, you're making paths within that courtyard. If you, when we toured Minuteman, they basically said it's not used for much of anything. It's just a blank space that's in between the middle of school. When we walk past the cafeteria that's adjacent to that courtyard with the huge windows there, they said, from the hours of, mainly because of their layout, from say 9 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock, if you walk through that area, you actually have to have sunglasses on because it's like 100 degrees and the sun is shining in your face. So those are kind of the reasons behind the courtyard, why I would like to take it off the table, but I do think that there could be potential good designs with it, whether it turned into an outside seating for, say, culinary arts or the cafeteria. I think there's potential. I just haven't seen one come to reality at this point.
I would concur with, I would concur with Keith on all of those observations, and I guess moving forward as we have input into the design, I would agree that a vision would be that it would be have a dedicated functional use, is what it would be used for culinary otherwise, or that it truly is a pass-through for kids. I hear the snow removal, but that it truly is, its purpose is to access the building by going outside. Part of the pass-through traffic for kids.
Is it cost saving factor for eliminating it?
No, as we said, we'll need to develop more detailed plans to know the cost of one option versus another. It's not inherently more costly.
Also,
Costly.
if I may, once we pick what we want in design, can we get new ones so we can get rid of these? Know what we're talking about,
Yes,
with new numbers and everything?
certainly. You'll have much better diagrams later.
Carl, on the, I don't know if Bob Mahoney mentioned something about moving the gym to the other side.
Mhm.
One of the things you mentioned was that puts the drop off point too far to the entrance to the driveway.
Mhm.
2.1 puts it in the middle. You weren't keen on the gym over there because of the drop off. You're just moving the center entrance a little further down. How does that impact the drop off? Is it significant compared to where it's on the far other side?
It's, I know it's not germane to the courtyard, I guess, but, if you look at it, about where it is, I don't know, if you can sort of keep that in your mind's eye, and then you go back to This one, it's not that much further, you know, it's maybe 30 feet, 40 feet further, 2 car lengths, or something further over, I guess, thing like that.
But I'm just looking at the transportation of the kids going from one side of the building to the other.
Yeah,
With the athletic field on the other side, now you can have everybody walking all the way through to the other side.
yeah, and I think the mass of the athletic field is in front of the building, not to the side of the building. So,
But that's, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it, but I'm not a big fan of that because it's, you see it in West Bridgewater and it's the worst place to play at right now. So, even though it's a turf field, but Route 106 going right back and forth. Yeah, kids,
Yeah.
balls flying over, off the hands, hitting the cars on 123. So, just not my.
again, yeah, the scale of this may be a little deceptive when you look at these layouts. Let me see if I can, sorry, get it back. Again, depending on what fields are there, I've been in Bridgewater several years ago, I can't remember exactly, but it did strike me as very close to the roads, closer than we're proposing actually here. There's a, you know, I think we've shown about 25, 30 feet just to the track.
Which if I could add, Carl, I had horticulture put some stakes in at 25 feet, which is roughly at the mulch line. You'll see a few in the daylight, you'll see some
Yeah,
stakes,
yeah.
4 or 5 of them. 25 feet is right about where the mulch line is,
Yeah.
not the mulch line closer to the school, the mulch line closer to the road.
Right, and then if it is a football or soccer, yeah, you need a fence to contain balls, but, and you know, we'd have to think about, like we said, home runs and where baseballs are going. Fortunately, again, home plate's pretty far from the road here, in this orientation, so I think it's still feasible and there's still a fair amount of grass here too, fortunately, as kind of the front lawn of the school, that you're looking across to see the building there, so I think it's feasible.
I'm sorry. West Bridgewater, get the track, and it's pretty much right there.
Right there.
It's not gonna happen. You're right.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry, Bob.
That's all right.
Carl, could you go back to, I'm sorry, on this 2.1, I know the motion is on the courtyard, but I'm trying to, I want to raise a couple of observations about this, because again, I might be inclined to reconsider option 3 if, again, I've just put out there, do you want variety in 2 new designs? Can you go to the second floor of that design, Carl? Can you talk a little bit, I'm looking at these pods, which I know it is a classroom, it's, but there's really no difference in the definition, right?
What do you mean?
Well, a pod is, what you're saying is a pod is those
Oh,
U-shaped.
it's a collection of
A
classrooms.
collection
Yeah,
of classrooms.
yes.
And you made it very clear that, boy, it looks like a triangle, but it's still square footage wise is okay.
Yeah,
Have you had schools designed like this? And here's what my question is. I look at the number of classrooms emptying out into those cul-de-sacs.
yeah.
And my initial reaction is, I can't do the scale in my head, so I'm not sure. Would that be a concern?
It is actually, and it's something to be concerned about, to think about.
And if we didn't have this design at 2 floors, and there was a 3rd floor for this kind of design, would that configuration?
That would go away.
Okay,
We would take, you know.
and that might be something you could develop further, you're saying?
Yes, in fact, this, you know, if we go back to I think at the end of this, I kept the old plans. So that you could just see a more conventional layout of, the upper floors.
Yeah.
Here, this one. It would just be that. More conventional double load, so-called, that's what double loaded court, it means rooms on one side or the other. And we get the inventory of classrooms that way. So it's not inherent in 2.1 to have those pods. We were just doing that to show you, if you wanted a 2-story building, this is how it could be achieved.
And just to extend it a little further, the tangible benefit of a 2-story building, that might score points for supervision. Well,
perhaps.
traffic on multiple floors, but
Yeah.
otherwise, it's not a building code issue, it's not
It's
a
a little bit of a building code issue.
going
in
to
that-
3 or staying at
Because,
2.
at 2, because you can have more floor openings from floor to floor in a 2-story building that are unprotected. From a fire,
Okay,
point of view, you can't have 3-story openings. Not that we were proposing any, because then you're into what's called an atrium, by building code definition, and it has to be, it gets more complicated and expensive with smoke exhaust and grading. And also the stairs in a 2-story building, if we protect the structure, I know this is getting a little technical, but you know, if you were to uncover a steel column in this building, it would be just steel. If we were to spray on fireproofing on every steel column and rate the entire steel frame, then when we have floor openings and we have stairs, they wouldn't have to have those fire doors. They could just be open. And so there's a little bit of a building code advantage with a 2-story building, but from a functional point of view, it's much more important to think about the flow and the circulation of those pods, the nature of, they're not really, triangular. In the end, we square off the acute corners so that they're really like 5-sided, but those 5-sided classrooms, people would need to get comfortable with that, shape. That's much more important than the building code issue, so,
But the alcove
Yeah.
issue, with the sort
and
of.
the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, the cul-de-sac concept, actually, as building manager, I'm more comfortable with a main street on 3 floors than several cul-de-sacs, just in
Right,
terms of
from
visual
supervision.
human
point of view,
behavior.
yes.
The teacher themselves is going to naturally flow out to the hallway when they have a better purview of what's happening on a longer span, as opposed to just in the cul-de-sac,
Right.
which is.
That's a good point.
Quick one, the cul-de-sac thing up on the 2nd floor. What's it like with a fire alarm going off and all the students are trying to get the hell out of the building?
Those corridors have to be designed wide enough to handle the traffic. If we, oops, I gotta get back to that. For the flow of people, because there are, I think, it depends on which ones, but up to 6 classrooms, is it? Let's just, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 classrooms times 20 to 25 kids, that's, so it has to be sized for that flow, and so that hallway there is oversized for that reason. But it's still congested, and it's a legitimate issue. We've done some buildings like this. We've done some middle schools that like to be organized like this too, because they're in a team and they don't have bells going off every 45 minutes necessarily. They have long blocks. And the coming and going wasn't as much of an issue. But also the cul-de-sac itself, the square space, can become, if you don't have teachers who are so inclined, it can become a dead space, as opposed to it's meant to be a usable space, a spill out space that with marker boards on the walls and a monitor and things like that. But it can be a dead space too. That's just like a wide hallway and it's kind of a dead end. So.
Actually, Tom, my question, Tom, I think Tom's first question was, have you designed those triangle?
Yes, we have.
Have done, you can give us.
There's some at Cape Cod Tech in one of the pods. There, but we did a whole school unfortunately it's way out in Pittsfield, but a vocational school, very much like this, with the 2nd floor and 3rd floor, had these kind of pods on top of the shops below. It's a Taconic High School in Pittsfield.
And the next question is, how do you, one of the things at Minuteman was, doing the tour, we stopped at the cafeteria, the bell was ringing, and the tour guide said, stand here and watch that stairway.
Yes,
And that stairway coming downstairs, 300 kids tried to pile down one little wide stairway. How do you actually do a model of that?
So we double the stairways. There's 2 here. Because there's 2 wings to this building, we figured there should be 2 stairways because, when the bell rings, all these kids are heading down, there's 1 stair here and there's 1 stair here for these kids there. So you have 2 stairways to try to separate the traffic. But again, there are rules of thumb on how to size stairways and, for the population. It does get crowded at certain times of the day. But it's always safe, there's always handrails, and certain widths, you don't have big wide open stairs without handrails to hold on to. And actually, again, if you wanna get into the weeds, the rise and run of steps, you know what that is, right? If you design it with 6-inch risers and 12-inch treads, you can walk up them without looking down at your feet. You feel much more safe and comfortable. When you go to what the code limit is of 7.5 inches high by 11 inches, you have to hold on to the handrail and it feels steep. So little things like that make a big difference in monumental stairs like this.
Trip up the
So,
stairs.
Yeah, you can trip up the stairs, you know, going down, you hold on to the handrail and it slows down everyone, that sort of thing. So
They don't have elevators for handicap accessibility too?
we'd have at least 2 elevators in all these buildings, I think, just because of the size of the building. And whenever, you know, here, remember, we're stacking the gym on top of the locker rooms to save floor space, as opposed to having to have locker rooms and gym next to it. You know, we've doubled the amount of space. So by putting it on top, we have to make sure that there's an elevator in that vicinity for students. You know, we'll have a dedicated stair, at least one, to get from locker room to gym. But we also want to make sure there's an elevator in that vicinity, and also for the public to get the. And then, you know, down in one wing or the other, at least there should be another elevator, because you don't want a student have to go all the way to the middle of the building and back out again. So, yeah.
Anything else after that? We have a motion on the floor to eliminate the courtyard, I think, auction. It's been a while.
We just had number 1.
Which is
NC1.
number 1, NC1. Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor of eliminating the courtyard? Right. Yeah. Opposed? Go ahead.
Sure.
Oh, she didn't raise her hand.
No, just you can leave me off the list, yeah. It's not unanimous, it passes.
It passed. Motion passed. So the courtyard is now eliminated. Now that leaves us with 6, 8, 6, something like that.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
it leaves us with 6. But now we can see visually, just if I could just kind of repeat what I had said a moment ago. We're left with 2 designs that are fundamentally similar.
Yep.
And so I would suggest one kind of general question. If the committee is content with that, NC2 and NC 2.1 have the same Main Street concept. The difference between the 2 is that in NC 2.1, you have the dining commons, as Carl has shown several times, in the center. And that might be worthy of conversation as to the pros and cons there. But it's fundamentally the same building. We also kind of teased out that in 2.1, while that is currently drawn as a 2-story building with the triangular classrooms going into cul-de-sacs, it's not going to cost us anything extra if 2.1 stays on the table. That could also be brought back to us as a 3-story building with the dining commons still in the center. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carl.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So I would just offer to the committee, if we end tonight, we've essentially agreed on the floor, on the floor plan, if you will, the center hallway, the linear approach. And we're gonna get 2 variations of linear. If you'd like some additional, again, I'm not trying to tease this out, like, I'm genuinely thinking this through as a committee member out loud, is that if you want to see 2 variations of fundamentally the same design, if you want to see one design where the heart of the school happens to be in the center, and there's another design where all the public stuff and the common areas are on one side. If that's consensus, then we've done our job tonight. After tonight, that's what they're gonna move forward with. So the 2 other unique designs, courtyard and linear, are now off the table. So there's just one last ask. I'm not asking I'm not making a motion. I don't have an opinion. I just wanted to make that point.
My only question would be to our administrators that is there anything you'd like to add to the linear design?
No, I don't have anything specific that I want to add to the linear design, but I would want Carl,
Change or?
yeah, so I would want Carl to know that, first of all, I want to make sure that we're building a building that is, a universal design for as many educational philosophies as possible, not ours in particular. That said, experience of a lot of years tells me that the cluster model on the academic side of the school does not work. It's not something we've ever been able to sustain. So a model, building the model that predicates clusters is unnecessary. Our clusters are our shop programs, and that our academics can almost be anywhere. We do like our teachers to be proximal to one another for content purposes, but assuming the kids are gonna be in a cluster for any purpose of rotations doesn't function for us.
Would a cluster be like the English department? Or
Yeah,
science?
exactly. Yeah, oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But I guess an academy model.
Yeah.
It's moving amongst sort of a middle school model does not function, doesn't work.
Out
for
of
us.
this one.
So like one of those cul-de-sacs could be teachers from multiple departments sharing the same 100 kids, and they just move within the cul-de-sac, as
That's
happens at many middle schools,
one reason Taconic ended up with that plan.
because they went to an overall model
And there were administrators in the cluster and the pod as well.
much bigger.
I think at Minuteman as well, I think when we toured the science department, he mentioned that because of the science department wasn't next to each other. It was a science department, was a science classroom on the inside of the building. From where the science, how do they get, and he said they make it work, but it's not the ideal thing because they ran out of science space where they were, and they had to move over to some other space.
Yeah, we've heard from the science department here, they like to be together.
Yeah.
And that's what this plan shows.
That's probably the one
Yeah.
academic content where the, being structurally next to each other, helps because of the sharing of resources
Yeah.
and the type of,
Shared
Yeah.
storage that they need. Intellectually, it's nice for all programs to have like-minded folks near them.
Administratively, does the linear, this design work better for supervision of the kids?
I like the
The law
supervision.
enforcement just came out.
I mean, I personally like that, I like it. When I look at 2.1, this isn't, I'm not saying this is the model I wanna go with, but I look at the 2.1, I like how the cafeteria is centrally located. Our office is essentially located. If there's an emergency, it's a quick disbursement either to this wing or to this wing. You get the line of sight, you turn it, you go around the corner, boom, you can see down the hallway, you can run over here real quick, see down the other hallway. It's not a bunch of fingers going off, it's 2 hallways to monitor. I also, there's other reasons I like it.
We've heard that same point from other administrators. Yeah, they appreciate it.
And the same is true from an instructional standpoint. One of the things that Tom coming back from one of our visits was that I didn't see a single student or teacher because there's so many different off roads to get to different locations. So I was kept saying, where are the kids? Where are the kids? Where are the kids? I couldn't find any kids. They weren't in the bathrooms, they were in the hallway. I don't know where they were. And that's one of the things that, that I appreciate about our overstuffed school is that when you walk down that central corridor, whether it's on floor 1, 2, or 3, you're gonna bump into staff and you're gonna have passerby instructional conversations, professional conversations, opportunities just for a greeting where you got a minute to talk about a more important thing that, in addition to safety, is a community, that while you look at the long hallway and it doesn't feel community, it actually does send a message of community.
So just one more question on this, thing goes, on the back of the shops, I know they're gonna have doors, overhead doors. Are they gonna have an entrance door as well?
Yeah.
Personnel.
Huh?
Personnel.
Yes.
Yes, a personnel door and,
Well, I'm just thinking for fire escapes, so fire,
they got that all on the second way out, one way into the corridor on the inside of the school, one way outside directly. And also, just whenever you have an overhead door,
it's just kind of
you generally
complicated.
want a personnel door next to it, so you don't have to open the whole big door in the middle of winter to let somebody in and out.
And you're gonna have 900 kids coming down.
Speaking of safety too, one of the challenges too, with, a lot of overhead doors, depending on the ventilation or the time of year, they often open the door for ventilation in their shop, right? And now anybody, who could make their way walking around the school could walk right into the school, right? So what we've found in a couple schools that have used are like collapsible gates.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see them in malls for like closing off a storefront or something, but it's still open, the air can pass through it. So they can get their ventilation, but they can have some security control on their process.
That's
So,
exactly that.
yes, yeah. So,
I'd like to, again, try to listen to Sandy and the administrators here. On the diagonal, again, back to 2.1 with the linear and the classroom with the cul-de-sac and stuff like that. If we get 6 or 7 classrooms entering into a cul-de-sac, they have 20 kids in each thing, you got 120 kids trying to all get out at the same time. At 2.1, the only option is a second floor with the pods. Could the 2.1 with the center entrance be easily designed with a third?
Yes, that's what we're saying, that either of these could have the pod 2.1 or 2, or have a third floor.
So if we move forward with 2 and 2.1, you could move forward with the feeling of the committee to move forward with 2.1 pod free,
Yes,
3 floors.
yes,
And the only difference between the two is what's in the center of the school, either the dining commons, et cetera, is in the center, or it's on the right.
right,
And fundamentally, everything else would be the same.
basically, yes.
Everybody content with that?
One of the things to point out, just to give you a head start then, I'm thinking about comparing the plans. On the first floor here, the commons is on the front of the building. It's clearly separated from the circulation path, you know. It's still wide open,
It's very important.
but it's, you know, there's a clear circulation path. The one sort of challenge here though is the kitchen is across the hall here, so the servery is here on this side. So at lunchtime, kids would be bringing their tray of food across the hallway to the dining tables over here.
Is it a sunken commons in this design, Carl? I
No,
don't see it.
it's all one
It's all
level,
one level.
all one level. And again, if students are coming from either wing, they're not, the students exiting the servery are really not crossing a circulation path.
The good news about this design, along with its simplicity and ease of supervision, is that we would have a first floor here that would actually be, as Sandy described, rather low traffic, because we're gonna have it, it's all shops, related room, toilet room.
Yep.
Everything is self-contained. So the only time, other than for school nurse, dismissal, or special function, that we would see regular hallway traffic is, let's assume that in one lunch or 2, let's assume that the first floor could all go to lunch at the same time, probably not, but 2 lunches. So that's an easy way to design to get all the kids on the first floor fed. Now they're back in their shops. The only time that we would see regular student traffic under our current schedule would be when the older kids in grade 11 or 12 are going to go to their related class on their academic week, and they'll have to come down from the 2nd or 3rd floor and make their way. And by that time of day, again, all else being equal, lunch service would be over.
The other traffic, which also could be segregated, is to get to the locker rooms for gym class. Again, if you're coming from this side of the building, there's a stair at either end of this side and a hallway on this way to get to the locker room. Likewise, over here, there's a stair at either end and a hallway to get to the locker room. So there's not gonna be a lot of crossing traffic through that
That's
middle
helpful.
part as well. And just to point out that in this option, the kitchen and servery are right here, right directly next to the commons. And again, the traffic is up at this end or going to the gym, to the locker rooms back here. But it's a more proximate location. But again, as we just pointed out, there's not gonna be a lot of crossing traffic in the 2.1 version. So, and then the other difference is perhaps, you know, I think each of these commons could have some outdoor space. There's room in the plan and the site plan to have some outdoor dining. And it could be contained in certain ways. For supervision reasons, whether it's fenced in or landscaped in, or somehow we still want to have obviously access from the bus drop off to get into the building in either one. In the 2.1 version, the outdoor space is on the front of the building. Again, I think we would envision this as some kind of, I don't know, evergreen screen wall or something for privacy somewhat, so that visitors aren't looking directly into the cafeteria as they approach the school. But it is something to think about, that you've got students potentially out front of the building, right front and center there, but our landscape architect can show you some options in that regard as to how that's handled. So,
I kind of like, NC two because of the location of the, locker rooms and getting to to practice field for football. It's, you kind of go out and around and go right to the field, where it's in this one, 2-1. The locker room is at the opposite side of the building from the practice field. Just saying.
yeah, there's gonna be a temptation, I think, for these athletes to, get in their uniforms and go out the front door. To the field, that's the most direct route as opposed to running around the building to
Yeah.
get there. Jack.
Because those
Yeah.
cleats,
They got the cleats on the.
there you go.
So they should be,
Wings now, is it?
they should consider it the warm-up is to leave the, and there is direct egress out of the locker rooms too in the back there.
Warm up back to the locker room, everybody. Let's go.
I was just thinking about what Dr. Hickey was saying about how we got two linear options on the table. I don't wanna put a motion forward to eliminate one of these, but I'm sitting here thinking to myself, basically, it's the same thing, just flipping stuff around, so should we put a motion forward to eliminate one? So maybe I'm going to make a motion to eliminate one of the linears, knowing that we can just swap stuff around. I mean, that's just my take, so I think I'll put it forward, I'll let you guys shoot it down if you want. To know hard feelings.
I'll second it for the purposes of discussion.
Which one though?
Um, That's a big motion, I'll take it.
My opinion,
We're gonna throw out the bathwater.
I would just go with the straight option of NC two. I'll call it 2.0 rather than 2.1. Well, I want to keep 2.1 on the table. It doesn't really matter, it's just my personal opinion.
So I'll second that more specific motion for purposes of discussion, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Jim.
2.1 is the only design of any of the new ones, those we've kicked to the curb and those we haven't, that has the common stuff in the center. And if folks are, again, this is a lot to ask in one night, but if folks are interested in having an option that shows stuff in the center of the school, for some of the reasons that maybe Bob had mentioned earlier, that might be a reason to keep that as a unique option. The number 2 and the ones we have eliminated all have the commons on the right side. The question, I think it would be too restrictive for us to end the night if we eliminated one of the 2s without replacing it with something. And that would be to reconsider one of the other 2 that we've already eliminated. But again, that's for the committee to decide if we like what we're seeing, then we shouldn't adopt the motion.
All right, any further discussion on that? I know where I am on that. We have a motion on the floor to eliminate 2.0. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor to eliminate? Raise your hand, say aye. Opposed? Thanks for bringing it up, Robert.
Had to put it up.
No, I know, hey, that's what they're all for.
But if there's interest in restoring number 1 or number 3, then there might have been more out of an appetite for that.
I don't say yes.
I think that, I mean, under today's working school system, I think 2.0 was good to have it out on the side, just because at night, you pretty much, that's the only access to the building. But with all the stuff going on now, the building's open all night long, the entire building, so you don't have a need to segregate something on the side. The security, that's everything. The center of the probably makes more sense. Plus, I know Dan's big on the aesthetics. I think it looks better if you have this front entrance.
I do have it.
Okay, so right now with our sporting programs, on a lot of nights and or most of the time weekends when we do our practices, we're able to shut off to a majority of the school and just keep gym locker room accessible, right? And that saves everybody a lot of time and hassle. So are any of these plans that we have right now work with that kind of procedure that we have?
Certainly this one, with, here's the locker rooms here. If you truly, we're only allowing like student athletes into the locker rooms to change and then go out to the field because it was either fall or spring, sports. you could envision people parking right here, coming, there's a door right there into either locker room, boys or girls, they split. And that's as far as they go into the building, they change, they get their equipment, they go back out again. So that does work in this option here. When it's in the center of the building, yeah, there's some parking back there, and you could do the same when it's in the center. So without opening
Able
up,
to shut off that part of the school so they can't.
it's a little tricky because the doors open in a certain direction, you know, it's hard to truly lock them out of the rest of the school in that sense.
I agree with Frank, because that was my thinking purpose of having the gym on the other side of where the fields were, because coaches do come in on weekends. And they don't have to access the whole building where the alarm can be shut off, but just open up the school for the gym and the locker room.
Yeah,
Now, once you do that, nobody else can go out in the hallway without setting off the alarms.
yeah, right, yeah.
So that way here, have it in the middle, that way then the whole school's open now.
Yeah, here again, here's the gym entrance here, there's some parking right here, here's the fields here, so they would come and go, there'd be a sidewalk along this side of the driveway, that would be the path. Without opening up the rest of the building, in that option, when it's in the center of the building, I'm sorry, back to. I'm sorry, this is, two, here's the gym over here in this one, it is back here. And you know, again, yeah, if you didn't allow them to go through the building, they'd have to go around to get to the field from the outside, but the same principle could happen. There could be parking spaces back here for the coaches, and they just come and go. But if you're opening up the building to students and it's a Saturday morning basketball practice, yeah, they come in the front door probably to access the locker rooms. You could still close off the wings. That's possible, and have just the center open, and they could get to the locker rooms. Just as easy as you could, you know, in the 2.0 here, you know, you can lock off here, you just have to lock off one corridor on each floor. And this end of the building could be open, and students could come in the front door and get to the locker rooms if they're not coming in the side door here to get to the locker room. So there's a pluses and minuses there, I guess, but each of them somewhat could operate in a similar fashion.
So, yeah. So, I'm sorry. Where we are right now is AR1, AR2.
No, just AR1.
AR1.
Yeah. And. There we go. Use 2.0, 2.0, and 2.0.
Yeah, so we've reached the target of having 6 possible designs. One ad reno, AR1, NC2, and NC 2.1, studying all 3 of those designs at 805 and 900 students.
800.
So that's
805 and 900.
that's 6 hours.
Yeah, 6 hours. Technically, there's also one called the base repair that we've already done, and we don't put it on here because it's not truly an educational option, but it's a required fixing deficiencies in the building without changing any walls. MSBA requires that.
And that's not an MSBA sponsored project, that's the price tag,
That's right.
all on the locals. If we
Some
had
of
to-
it, you know, the window replacement, you can't get,
Oh,
so
accelerated
a very
repair.
small portion of it could be reimbursed, but you've already done the windows now. The roofs could be reimbursed too, but that's about it. But that's really a baseline for comparison of just fixing deficiencies that we would also have. We've already worked on it. We'll give that to the estimator to the price.
How you got your mantra going?
We do. Thank you very much for this. We appreciate it. We'll be able to give you a very good, we'll be developing 3-dimensional views for these 2 options, including interior, so you could appreciate the inside and the outside, perhaps, you know, not really complete, you know, highly developed designs with colors and finishes and things, but at least the massing, you can get a sense for what a 2-story space feels like, or what the 200-foot long hallway feels like versus the 400-foot long hallway, or whatever.
I
I just have a quick question. Thirdly, having a son that's a firefighter, it's a flat roof, right?
Yes. For the most part.
On the roof, right, on the roof, that's the flat roof. If it, on the end where it falls off, are you gonna have guardrails up there? Because,
Not necessarily,
well,
but
because he's been on a fire on
I know,
a
I
flat
know.
roof and it's been so much smoke that he came this close to
Yes.
falling off the building.
we will meet with the locals and see what their preference is.
Thank you, Michael, my son.
That can do a lot of magic.
In courtyard designs, yeah, we've actually had to put guardrails around there because that's a little more. The firefighters tell us they sense, they know where the edge of the building is, but when there's a courtyard in the middle of a smoky roof,
Yeah.
we often do end up putting guardrails around that because. Or if we have skylights, literally just little plastic bubbles, sometimes those have to be, if they're not strong enough, you step on them, they break and you fall through. We have to put guardrails around those too.
We'll just get a fire department first.
One quick question before we turn out, is there anything MSBA, do they ever reimburse you for if we put solar panels on top of parking? Bill Collins, do they reimburse for
It
that?
can be part of the project. The issue becomes kind of, what is it, semantic or moot in the sense that the cost of this building is gonna far exceed the MSBA's threshold for cost per square foot. So we could put gold-plated hardware on the building and they may allow it, but they're not going to technically reimburse for it because we're so far beyond.
Maybe with the new technology and everything else going right,
But
that was something to say.
more likely, the positive thing they have done is they said, if you write a grant to get solar panels and put on a carport in your parking lot, they won't subtract that grant from their grant. They used to do that, believe it or not. It was, kind of made no sense, but it was a disincentive for districts to go out and raise money for themselves because MSBA would just say, oh, thank you very much. 100,000 from that group over there, we're gonna take it, reduce our grant by 100,000. So they changed that though, they literally passed a policy that said, for those kinds, and there's great rebates available from utility companies, if you were to get those, including for solar panels, they would not reduce their grant, so in that sense, they support it.
So at our next meeting, we'll have new designs and new prices.
Well, we'll
So
be
we know
working
what
on
we're
them,
looking at.
we do wanna talk about,
There's one last agenda item, which is timelines.
and
Carl, based on, we've met milestones tonight. Would we want to meet again after Thanksgiving in the last week of November, 2 weeks from now, whether it's in person or on Zoom, would you have more updated designs in 2 weeks? Or is this something that,
I think we'd have, better site plans.
Better site plans.
By Warner Larson,
Okay.
the landscape architects, civil engineers that we could share with you.
so I'll survey committee members for availability for the
Yeah, I
last
think
week
it
of
would be
November?
useful to have an interim
22nd,
meeting.
25th.
Something like 29th or something around that.
Because in order to get, good prices to you in January, we have to give our information to the cost estimators in mid-December. So it would be good to have another meeting. At
So
the
the
end.
more feedback we can now give you on NC2 and NC 2.1 between now and mid-December, the better.
Yes,
So we'll shoot for something in a couple
Yeah.
of weeks.
I know, we can print out these are slightly updated plans.
Yeah.
And distribute them, and if people have comments, if they could sort of funnel them through the superintendent's office and get them to us,
Yeah.
in the interim, we can deal with those.
And we can also print out any of the latest versions, that Dan can have a shredding party. And we can also snail mail hard copies of these color copies to folks at a convenience as well.
So next meeting.
Next meeting, Tom, at the pleasure of the committee would probably be I would, tonight is a Wednesday night, so perhaps the 29th or 30th of November. We can do, I have Susan reach out to folks and see what availability looks like. Whether it's, if it's a limited light agenda, if it's gonna be more dialogue, like we had deep dialogue tonight, we'll do something in person. And we can nail that down, but I would think one of those 2 dates would work best. To allow for feedback and more work for us.
If I have anything else.
Fine.
Mr. Salvucci, sir, motion to adjourn, second by Abington. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.